Hi, welcome to The Big Twist, where we talk to creatives about the biggest plot twist that they have encountered in their careers. I am Anna Carini.
And last time too, I'm sorry. I just don't like saying my name. You could just say my name for me. I don't know.
Oh, you've got food in your teeth.
Oh God.
I'm glad we saw that. My name is Anna Carini. This is my co-host, Angela Trevino. And
we're so excited to have today Meagan Daine. She is a writer, producer, podcaster, and she was most recently staffed on the Amazon Prime show Cross. So welcome, Meagan.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah,
we're so happy to have you. She's a good friend of ours.
Oh yeah, she's
we
a
love
good
Meagan.
friend. Yeah, I've known Meagan since 2013, I think. It's been a
no.
while.
I think I've known you that long too, or 2014.
A long time. Yeah, about that long. Yeah.
We actually met in a writing class, UCLA Extension.
That's
Highly
right.
recommend.
Yeah, you can meet great people there.
So we like to start off by asking our guest about a story that defines them, or defines their personality. Like if you can just give us like an interesting story that might tell us a lot about who you are as a person, that would be great.
So I was thinking about this question when you said you were going to ask me, because there are so many, right?
Good.
But for some reason, I was reminded of a story, something that happened that when I told it, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, that is just the most Meagan story ever." So I'm like, okay, I guess this is probably the one. And that is from my very early 20s. I was dating a guy, and we'd been together for like maybe 4 or 5 months, barely knew each other, just were going out and having a really good time. And I decided that I was going to move. And I was going to go to graduate school. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to grad school. Do you want to go with me? And he was like, yeah, okay. So it was all very casual, right? But it was just sort of like the things that you do when you're like in your 20s and you have no attachments in the world. And you're just like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. You want to go? Yeah, sure. But then when we got to LA, which is where we were going to be, we found that we had a very hard time getting a place to live because he was undocumented. When you don't have certain types of documentation, it can be really hard to go through a formal application process, right?
Sure.
And people don't have credit and things like that. And so we just kind of kept running into all of these issues. And so one day after we'd had a particularly frustrating day, this guy just broke down crying in the car. And he was like, I just don't know what to do. I'm trying so hard to be a good person and to make something out of myself. And I can't do it. I'm not allowed. Right. And so I said, well, do you want to just get married? And so he was like, yeah, okay.
Oh, wow.
So
that solves the problem.
Well, I mean, one might think, but it actually didn't, unfortunately. It was we eloped 2 days later, and it was great, and we had a blast. It was the most fun wedding I've ever been part of. And then, we moved in together and everything was great, but it ended up taking 6 years from that point to actually get his papers. So it's like this thing that I basically said on a whim, ended up occupying the next 6 years of my life. But I stuck with it the whole time. We got his papers. And then in the process, we sort of were like, oh, we actually are married, as we're going through the firefight. So,
wow.
So yeah, that story, I guess, kind of the reason why my friend said that was the most Meagan story ever is because he considers me the quintessential ride or die. And that I kind of am that person. If I get involved in something, right? I'm just in it till the end.
Well, that's what I heard when you said, because I was listening to the story and I was like, how is this Meagan? And then I was like, oh, when you said, I decide something on a whim and then it occupies the next 6 years of my life. As soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, That's Meagan.
Yeah. It's like I just don't give up on things. I don't.
And I can attest to that from the perspective of you started this hiking group that we're both a part of, and you've kept it up for the last 2.5, 3 years, consistent,
Something like that, yeah.
almost every single month. It's like, we're going on a hike. This is the time. This is the day. It's like the fact that you've had that level of commitment, I think is so admirable. And I think it speaks to it speaks to how, you, when you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely.
And that group has been, about you.
Yeah, I do too. Sorry to talk over you.
No,
I was just saying
good.
and that writing group has been, that writer's hiking group has been incredible.
Yay.
Like it's been such a joy and such a wonderful part of my life.
Aw, same.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being part of it, you guys.
Yeah, we're all like women writers, producers, actors that, have gone through like trials and tribulations in this industry. So.
Talking about our plot twists to each other as we hike.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That's how you guys met.
Yeah.
Funny
So
enough.
you brought us together.
This podcast would not be happening if it were not for Meagan Daine.
So true.
So that kind of leads us into, I would love to talk about the different paths the windy path that you have taken to get here, because I know you've had so many interesting different careers and things that you've done before becoming a TV writer. And I think that's only like informed your writing, and like basically you have a wide and interesting pool of experiences that you can then have inform your writing. So I would just love to talk a little bit about that.
I did not expect to be a writer. I thought that I thought that I was going to be working in education initially. And when my husband at the time and I finally got his papers, we, were thinking, now we're going to buy a house and settle down and have kids and live a very quiet 9-to-5 type of life. And at the time I was working for an educational publishing company, which basically they do test prep materials. They write SAT questions and the books where you're like, how to ace the ACT or whatever. Somebody has to write that stuff. So that was what I was doing. And, it was fun and it paid fine. And so I thought it would be a really great career. And then there was the recession. And I think
2009,
2008, 2009,
mm-hmm.
It was, it was something that I did not understand at that time. And I think a lot of people don't understand still how much that changed the world. Because, my husband and I had no money. Like we didn't have stocks. We didn't have property. We didn't have anything that like was of any monetary value. So we thought when people were talking about, oh God, we're in a recession, we were like, oh, that affects other people. That doesn't really affect us. And we had always worked multiple jobs. We both worked in the hospitality industry, waiting tables, busing, being a barista, whatever we had to do. So we're like, we'll just get by like we always have. But in actuality, that turned out not to be possible because all of the jobs went away. All of the industries started to just be hollowed out from the inside. This is when social media was coming into existence for the first time. It was when newspapers were really transitioning to digital. And so like all of the journalism jobs, all of the publishing jobs, all of the marketing jobs were kind of going away. And this new thing was coming into being. And it was happening in a lot of other industries as well. But it was just like, that was what I was kind of familiar with at the time. And when people were losing their jobs, they then got bumped down to the like blue collar layer. So all of those people were now vying for jobs as waiters or bussers or bartenders or nannies or assistants. So when my husband and I were looking for those kinds of jobs, we would end up like waiting in a line for 2 hours just for an opportunity to submit an application for something, which was like, a bottom of the barrel type of job. And then you'd get up to the front and they'd be like, sorry, we're not taking any more applications. Right. So it was just a really transformative time. And we also ran into this horrible string of bad luck in that year and ended up just in absolutely dire straits. I mean, we were like going from we had some money saved and we were going to buy a house and start a family to we've got like $25 and we're sitting on the floor of an apartment with no furniture and like, what the hell are we going to do?
Wow.
Wow.
So, I mean, you talk about a plot twist because what we came to was this realization of like, we have to do whatever it takes to make money. And that means just looking for jobs all over the country and taking whatever we can get. And it turned out that what I got was a job as an undercover decoy for a private investigator in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we moved to Oakland and I started working for this man.
Can we just say that again? I'm sorry. Can you just repeat one more time for the viewers, what your job was that you got?
Yeah, okay. So
you can say
I didn't really, I mean, I applied for something, but it turned into something else. So I applied for what was a very part-time gig as an undercover decoy. Undercover decoys are sort of like the operatives, I guess you could say. They're the people that go out with a cover identity and they interact with subjects in an investigation. And it's either to like get evidence, to get the person to reveal something about themselves, or to get them into some kind of situation where they expose whatever activity it is that you're trying to catch them doing. And so, yeah, so that, I mean, in a way it sounds cool, but then also it's like, sometimes this means you're just trying to catch a cheating spouse. So you just kind of throw it all out there. And sure enough, they called me. But when I got there, the private investigator said, actually, I didn't think that you would make a good undercover decoy, but I noticed that you have some writing experience. And my firm is starting to get a lot of media attention. And I think we're about to blow up. We're basically going to go viral. And I want somebody who can be here from the beginning to see how things work behind the scenes, to train with me and all my investigators who were supposedly like female investigators. They did exist, but they weren't actually being paid to be there. And
this story is wild.
It's wild.
Okay.
But yeah, I want you to train with all my female investigators and then write a book about it. And then I will pay you to do this. And the book is going to be published. And like, we're all going to get rich and famous.
So he was seeing way long term. Like this vision was like, we haven't even gone viral yet. And he wants to hire someone to document the successful thing he thinks is going to happen. Yeah. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So it was definitely a little bullshitty, but it was also, I mean, there was just enough credibility to it for a couple of different reasons. One, there was actually a woman there who brought me into the interview, and she was super cool and professional. And so in my mind, I was like, why would this woman be here if this isn't legit, right? And then she also showed me, before I met the PI in the interview, she showed me like a sizzle reel for a reality show based on the agency that they were trying to sell. And she was like, People magazine came out, they did a whole like 4-page, 6-page spread on us or whatever. They're just waiting for the right time to publish it, right? Because, you know, world events happen or whatever, and we get bumped, like a prince gets married or something like that. And but it's going to happen any day now. And then when that happens, there's going to be this huge wave of publicity, and we're going to sell the reality show. And then you're going to have this book. So, I mean, you can imagine, like, I was shocked. Because I'm like, I mean, yes, I definitely want this. I definitely know myself, and I know that I can do this, because if I say I'm going to do something, I always absolutely do it. But they don't know that. Like, I have the most pathetic, cheap, fake ass resume that I could possibly have had, right? So I don't know, man, but I had to try it. I had to get into it and see what was going to happen. And what ultimately it turned out to be was that the PI was running a crime ring. And he was using the women and the publicity as a front so that like he could be out there in the media with them and all sparkly and pretty and look over here and don't look behind the scenes where he was working with a bunch of corrupt police officers and selling drugs and like running a brothel and all kinds of other crazy shady things. I was working with him mostly one-on-one. I was trying to follow through with my promise of writing a book, but I couldn't write about what was actually going on. So I was essentially like creating propaganda, fictionalizing a lot of things, coming up with a story that would appeal to the press and to agents and would fit into this whole like wave of publicity that was going to come out. And I was successful, but at the same time, I was getting pulled into this sort of like criminal underworld that he was running. And I got to the point where I realized I had an agent, I had a book proposal. The publicity had come out. People magazine had published the article. We were on all these different talk shows. Lifetime had bought a reality show. They were going to start shooting on Monday. My book proposal was going to go out to agents on Monday. And Chris was basically threatening my life. I hadn't said his name until now, but his name was Chris. Anyway.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So the PI, Chris, was threatening me. And I realized I have to get out now.
Wow.
And
what kind of threats were they? Like, was he just like, if you don't do this, if you don't do as I tell you, then it's going to be trouble? Or like,
yeah, essentially. I mean, it was, I had tried to create a little bit of space between me and this world because how do I put this? I knew I needed to get out. It was getting really dangerous for me, but I didn't know how because I mean, he was in cahoots with all these cops, right? So it wasn't like I could like report the crimes to the police. And he also had FBI agents who were his friends and a lot of like attorneys. And, so the whole power structure seemed to be revolving around him, not to mention that all of this media had come in and covered him and like he was becoming a celebrity. And who was I, right? Like nobody was going to believe me if I told them, that something shady was going on. And even if I could prove it, nobody was going to care. Nobody was going to care. All they cared about was this story of like, oh, this man with all these women who are working for him as private investigators. That's so cool. They loved it. They didn't care if it was true. They didn't care what was going on behind the scenes. So I didn't know how to get out. And I also knew that when I did get out, I was going to have absolutely nothing because my husband and I had split up as a result of a lot of the stress and pressure that I was under during this time and the fact that I was having to lie a lot. And I didn't have any friends at the time. Nobody knew what was going on. I was completely isolated. I had one person in my life who had an inkling of what was happening. And so I said, hey, I need to come and stay with you for a couple of days, kind of like while I get things sorted out. And this friend was the man who is now my partner 15 years later. His name is John Lorenz. And he was like, of course, come down, I'll help you, whatever. So I was living in the Bay Area. John drove up there, helped me pack up all my stuff, drove it down to LA. And what I told the PI was, hey, I'm just going down to like, see a few friends and go to like a wedding or something, just to kind of buy myself time. But I didn't like fully cut myself off. Right. So what I was hoping when that happened, when I moved out and I crashed at John's place and I was like kind of laying low, and I was like, maybe I can still make it to the finish line and actually publish this book, and he'll leave me alone because I'm too far away. He doesn't know where I am, and he needs me because I've got the book, right? So, so I just waited for a few days, and then he started threatening me and saying, "You have to get your ass back up here. And if you don't, I'm going to destroy your life. I'm going to out you as a fraud in the national media. And basically, somebody else is going to come in and write the story of the fraud that was you."
Wow.
And yeah, so I realized that it was never going to get any better. He was never going to let me go. He needed me under his control, and I had seen too much, so I like cut myself off completely, gave up all my rights to the book, and sort of went into hiding and like changed my number, changed my name, all this stuff. So that moment was kind of like rock bottom, but I came away from that. The reason that I tell this whole story is I came away from that with something that I had never had before, which was the feeling I am a writer. And so I was kind of hooked on that. And I was living in LA. And I just was like, okay, well, I guess this is the thing I'm going to do now. And decided that I was going to be a writer in the film and TV industry, and stuck with it for 15 years. So
this is maybe one of the wildest stories I've ever heard of someone. At the end of all of that, what you say is, what I took from this is I'm a writer. Like, what? Yes,
I know, it's bizarre, but
it's like the wildest journey I've ever heard of getting to like television writing.
Wait to see the silver lining, right? Because I feel like that is something I have done too, where, you have like the crappiest job. Like I once sold like door-to-door alarms like in the blistering Texas heat. And
I didn't know this story.
My thought was like, oh, this is going to make such a cool story. Like I'm like meeting all these interesting people. And like, I learned so much about human psychology doing that job, or like, cause you had to figure out like, how am I going to get this person to trust me in like 10 seconds and like let me in the door and let me sell them an alarm system. Like it's actually quite fascinating, like the things that people will say when they're going door to door in order to get in the house, right? But anyway, my point being is it was a crappy job, and my feeling was like, oh, this is going to make a great story one day, which, I think it's so interesting that you are now developing a project that is loosely based on a lot of the trials and tribulations that you went through with this psycho. Because I think that's often what we do as writers. Like we take like the worst thing that happened to us, or one of the worst things, and then we like twist it into like, well, this is something that other people can learn from, or that, I want to bring out into the world because it's such an insane story.
So I kind of struggle with that idea a little bit. Like, first of all, really interesting that you had to like learn psychology to figure out how to talk your way into people's houses to sell alarms. Not dissimilar from what you actually have to do as a private investigator / undercover decoy. But like the idea of like, this is going to make a great story someday, I think it sort of like poisons people's minds. Like as an artist, you can't ever really just experience something without trying to figure out how you're going to not just like turn it into art, but because everything is so fiercely commercialized, it's how am I going to sell this? And I think like that was something that ended up being like really detrimental to like my development as a person. Because when I was, in this situation with this PI and all of this weird criminal activity that was going on, I could not see it clearly. I couldn't see clearly what was going on for like well over a decade, because I was so like, I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to make such a great story. Oh my God, how can I sell this? Right? How do I have to present myself? And like, all of a sudden, I'm not a human being, I'm a character. Right? And so it turned out that I was actually going through something that was very traumatic. But I didn't realize it because I was so fixated on that. Like, how am I going to sell this? How am I going to sell this? And then, years and years and years later, I still haven't processed the trauma. I still haven't gotten over the shit that I had to go through at that time just to survive. So I think, there's no moral to this story exactly, but I just, I realize working through that now that sometimes I don't think it is about like, this is going to make a great story. I think it's really good for people, for us to just let ourselves live something and kind of be humans and not be marketing machines or brands.
Totally. And I would say that like, I wish sometimes, like, I think for me, it's both a blessing and a curse to have the brain of a writer, because I can tell for me personally, I can't shut off that part of my brain. I can't shut off the part of my brain that's like, oh my gosh, that's a great line. I want to put it in a script, even as I'm living it, right? Even as I'm like getting broken up with, or like the doctor is delivering like horrible news or whatever. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, and then I would put this in a novel somewhere. So I think it's really, I love what you said about like, don't like try to sometimes turn off that part of your brain, but then at the same time, also understanding that like, that's just how some of us are wired, unfortunately. Like, I think oftentimes like being a writer means being a sponge and you're constantly like taking in all of these different stimuli and information and emotions. And then you want to like make it into something else. Right. And so it can be tough, right, to just like live in the moment, or it can be tough to just like process something not by writing about it, which tends to be our default,
It's interesting to think about from an acting point of view perspective, because I'm trying to think about how I do that or if I do that. But it's more like, I don't know. That's just really interesting to hear about as a writer, that you just, because we see things in stories, right? Like even as an actor, I see things in stories, but I don't think I get that fixated on it either of like, this is a great story. But I will be aware of like something happens and I live something and I experience it. And then later I might be like, oh, that would make a great story. Or I tell someone about it and they're like, are you writing this down? Like you have these wild things that happen in your life. And like, are you documenting this? And do you want to tell this story one day? So I feel like that shows up for me in my life that way, Maura. But I think the point is beautiful and wonderful and really is great for creatives to hear, especially writers, if this is how a lot of them feel, I don't know, but of like, just trying to live. We just want to be, I love that you said it feels like you're not human. You're a character and you don't want to be that. We want to be humans. We want to be living life, enjoying, experiencing, and not always thinking about how is this part of our professional world or creative world all the time.
And I think it creates this kind of pressure. I especially felt this when I was younger, where I was like, oh, I haven't lived through enough interesting things to have anything to write about, right? Yeah. So it creates this kind of pressure of like, I have to see the world and I have to like go through breakups and dating and and marriage problems and have children, like because I need to have all these life experiences to then write about, right? Yeah. And then the older you get, the more that you're like, no, actually, you can just use your imagination. Like you do not need to be involved in a crime in order to write about it.
Yeah, no, it takes a lot of empathy too. Yeah. It's just having imagination and empathy. Because I had actually the very opposite. Like when I got into writing by writing a story that just like poured out of me, and it did come from dealing with death at a youngish age, like losing family members when I was young, losing young family members when I was young. And watching the evolution of my family once that happened was just heartbreaking and fascinating. And I felt like I just had this story I needed to tell. It ended up being the first play I ever wrote. It was produced. We produced it in Chicago, my theater company. It did very well. And that was maybe a way of me processing. And it had nothing to do with my actual personal life. It's just I find that I gravitate toward true crime. I write about death a lot. And I think that's because I was so defined by it at a youngish age when I started finding my creative outlets. And so that's how it's manifested for me. And like, I didn't feel like I needed to go out and experience things. Things just happen and they have been big. And then maybe writing about it is an interesting way for me to process it or share and feel connected to the rest of the world. is my perspective more.
That's interesting. Yeah. Angela, I'm kind of more, I was very much like you. Like when I was, 14 or something, and I was writing in my journal, I definitely felt pressure to like, go out and live, like have to experience the world. And I remember distinctly, it's so funny what you were saying about like feeling like you needed to go through bad things, right? Because I remember distinctly writing in my journal, like, do I have to suffer to be able to have, or to have something to say? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like a flip side of it, that like you do. I mean, I think, yes, empathy and imagination are critical, but also you do kind of have to live some life to have anything perhaps that you can write, right? You can write your stories and your poems and whatever, but to have something that is really worthwhile and has staying power and is going to hit people in a different way than anything else they've ever experienced before, I think you actually do have to get out and live something. Mm-hmm. But if you do it like self-consciously, then you're screwing yourself in advance. I mean, I don't have any answers.
You can't plan for it.
And I'm just saying like this is what I have come, the conclusion that I have come to is that I have failed. Well, because I was so self-conscious about certain things that I was living through that I wasn't able to experience them or to understand them in a meaningful way. And
as
so
they were happening, or
even in years after, and like those two experiences that I mentioned to you guys, there's the experience of being married to this man and everything that we had to go through to get his papers. It was, oh my gosh, it was a lot. And then this whole experience with this PI, those are just two things that happened. There were so many other things. It was just like a constant struggle for years and years and years until finally I was, I think the first time that I ever felt like I had a foothold was when I got staffed, which was the first show that I was staffed on was Games People Play. Vanessa Middleton, the showrunner, I had been working for her as an assistant, and then she staffed me on the second season of the show. Angela was working with us on that second season. So that was her first
That was
drama.
my first TV writer's room.
Yeah, first writer's room.
And right before the pandemic.
Exactly.
And then we went from meeting in person to a virtual room.
Yeah.
That obviously changes the dynamic as the world was going crazy.
Yeah.
So it was a nutty period.
Everything falls apart. So the struggles remain. But for me, that was the first time I'd ever made enough money that I could actually save some. And sort of like the world shut down and I had a little extra money. And so I could just sit and just be for a little while. And then for the very first time, I started processing all of the shit from the 20 years or however many years it had been that I'd just been going through stuff on my own. And then I think, honestly, for the first time, I sort of started to have something to write about. But it took living through all these things and then getting to a place where I was sort of forced to contemplate them. Because when the world is open and business is as usual, you're just hustling all the time, right? Like you just have to, you never let yourself rest. You're just like, I have to do this. I have to think, oh, somebody's breaking up with me. I have to think about how I could write that in a script and then how I could market that script so that I could, sell it and make money and be famous or whatever it is that you're trying to do, right?
Totally. And I think that there is truly a distinction in that, like, for a lot of us, we write in order to process the trauma. Like, I've been doing this since I was a kid, where like I would write in my journal, like, so-and-so was mean to me, tears, tears, tears. And then like I would process the trauma like as I was writing it. Mm-hmm. I did the same thing with the first script that got me traction. Separated is about going through a divorce in the middle of the pandemic. So it was like, it was a way to process that pain, right? Versus if you're writing, if you're like approaching it from the perspective of like, oh, this is going to make a cool story one day. Or like, you're like, your commercial brain, I guess what I'm saying is your commercial brain cannot be on when you're putting pen to paper. It should be either a way to process the trauma, which a lot of us do, or like you've already processed the trauma and then now you're just like, reflecting on what happened to you and putting that to paper. I think it's when we wear that very commercial hat of like, ooh, how am I going to sell this? That's when it becomes inauthentic, or it can potentially like damage the process for you, or, like you end up getting into these murky situations where you're like, am I doing it just for the sake of the story? Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, damaging the process is a good way of putting it. Yeah, because then, I mean, you definitely do get in a situation where it's just you can't get at the real stuff that way. So you have to be able to, like you say, turn off your commercial brain for a little while, do the thing, and then turn your commercial brain back on, and then figure out how to sell the thing if that's your goal, right? Which I think probably for those of us in this room and for most of the people listening to your podcast, that is the ultimate goal. We want to be able to make a living, right?
We do. It's making me, this is bringing up a lot for me. I'm thinking about a lot, but it's bringing up a lot about, I'm thinking about an acting coach, Risa Brayman Garcia, who's a casting director as well. And something that she would always ask when I was taking classes with her, of like, if you knew you would never ever sell anything, would you still make your art? Can you do art just for art's sake? And does it mean that much to you? And what do you want with this? And what are you doing? And I would think about that a lot. And that's coming up for me right now. Because I also think with age and more wisdom comes. And so there's like success has changed for me over different periods of my life. And at this point, I mean, one of the reasons I think this podcast has started, at this point, I just kind of want to make things I love with the people I love. And that's always been really important to me. That's how I started out in my creative journey and my creative process. And then it got to this point of, oh, I want to make a living at this. So how do I? And then that's where you can, I think, start seeing your process get corrupted and damaged. And then I think I'm maybe coming out on the other side at this point of like, well, I still just want to make things I love with the people I love. And let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like relatable to anything we were talking about. But it feels like it. It's just, that's what got me excited and started about things when I was younger. And now it's like, I want to get back to that. Especially when I moved to LA, it was like, because when I was in Chicago for years, it was very much, we were all just like bootstrapping it and making our own things and doing our own things. And I loved it. And I had a theater company and we all were scrappy and, made these productions we loved. And there was such a great community there and all these things. And I got to LA and I was like, well, okay, now I want to do it the LA way. And I started taking like the business of LA classes when I moved here instead of acting classes. I was like, I know how to do that. I've trained, I've done all this, but I probably should have started with the business part of it, right? A lot of people do that and are very successful. But I just, I'm very much of like go with the flow. My creative things, my heart tells me to do this. So I started taking all these like the business of acting and the business of being an actor in LA classes. And I wanted to really do it the LA way. And I think that that's been an interesting process and experience for me. And that's fine. And that's what I did for a while. And now it's fun to come full circle and be like, this is what I want. And this is fulfilling. And this makes me feel authentic. I've been thinking about the authenticity was really sticking out for me of what you guys were talking about. And I said, this is what makes me feel authentic, showing up authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of us, like our childhoods, if you're a writer, like it can be marked by a lot of solitude, right? Of like, I see the world in a different way. I'm like constantly recording it and I'm just kind of observing it. I'm kind of like a wallflower in some ways. A lot of writers relate to that idea of just like, oh, I'm just observing, right? I'm recording everything and there's an isolation, there's a loneliness to that. And I think for me, one of my impetus in writing is to connect, right? To feel less alone, to feel like, I'm not on this journey alone. And I think to your point, Meagan, you really only get to that feeling of connection when you come across other people that have gone through similar life experiences, similar traumas, right? And then you can be like, oh, we see eye to eye about this, Like that very much happens with me when I come across someone who has lived through cancer. Right. Where like, I feel like this like immediate kinship with that person, right? Like there's something about our pain sometimes connecting us in a way that our joy doesn't as much, because it's like trauma bonding, right? It's just like this idea of like, oh, you went through what I went through, and I think oftentimes that is why writers write about very painful things, because it's a way for us to relate to other people that have gone through a painful experience and to be like, oh, I wasn't alone in that moment that I was going through this horrible life experience. Like other people have been in similar situations.
Well, and that's what makes a story resonate, right? That's what makes a story connect. Because from an acting point of view, it's the same thing. I want to portray characters that people can connect with and identify with, and makes other people feel less alone in the world by playing these characters. But that's something that stood out to me when I started writing, like this first play that I keep talking about a lot. When it first went up, I cannot tell you the number of people that came up to me and were like, "You wrote my life." And I was like, I'm sorry, I, one, don't know you. And two, I did have like some people who were close to me say that as well. And they were like, how did you know that this would feel like this, or that this thing would feel like this? And I was like, I don't. I just imagined and empathized. Like because I've never experienced this. These were like certain parts of my story that people were pulling out. But then a friend of mine said something to me that has just always stuck. And I think we've probably all heard in some manner, in some way or another, is that the things you think are the most personal are actually the most universal. And you think these things are just yours. But then when you put it out in the world and when you meet people and you talk to people, you realize everyone has experienced what you're experiencing on some level. And then when you make these stories and you create these stories and people resonate with it, that's what it is. And that feels so beautifully comforting to me, and a part of like why we do this, or why I do it.
I love that. Yeah. I think again, like I'm coming from a place of kind of knowing what you guys were originally talking about doing with this podcast. You're talking about careers, right? And career pivots and why you pivot and things like that. And I think what you guys are talking about is a completely different thing. Like you're talking about not pivoting. You're talking about becoming truer and truer to yourself. To be able to connect with people on a genuine level. That's not pivoting. That's just being like paring things down, or like
becoming more authentic.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the sometimes the dichotomy, right? Where like you often have to pivot for financial reasons. You have to continue to pivot professionally, and especially now you have to be a multi-hyphenate. Where it's like, well, if I'm not making my money as a writer, I can direct. Or if I'm not directing, I can produce. Like, like pretty much all of us have multiple things that we can do in this industry, because it is such a tough industry that you do have to constantly be reinventing yourself, right? But I think as you get older, you also get more authentic. And I think that that's where like, in some ways you're constantly reinventing yourself professionally, but then opposite of that, you're becoming much more of an authentic human and more true to yourself. And like you just start to like grow to like know the things that are hang on to the things that matter, I suppose. Like the older you get, to me, the older you get, the less superficial you get, or at least that's been my experience, where like it's no longer about like, oh my gosh, am I wearing the cutest outfit? But more about like, can I just have a meaningful conversation with this friend that I care about, Yeah,
I mean, it's really interesting because I think, you're talking about like getting closer to what's really important. And what I would love to be able to say to myself, anybody who's listening to this podcast, is that the status of your quote unquote career actually isn't the important thing. And even saying that out loud makes me feel scared, because I'm like, but it is so important. I've worked so hard.
When our identities can be wrapped up in our work.
Absolutely. But at the same time, like your work isn't necessarily your career either. Like once you actually start working as a writer or an actor or, director or what have you in this industry, like you're just doing what you're getting paid to do. And if you're extremely lucky, sometimes it's something that you truly care about, that truly resonates with you. But most of the time it's not going to be, right? And I think that's why people, even once their career gets going, they start to feel a little jaded because they are separated from what actually is important to them. So, I mean, on the flip side of that, if your career is not going well, or if you're not yet making a living at this, or you were making a living and now you're not anymore, maybe that's not the end of the world, right? Like, we all have to make money. We all have to figure out a way to get by. But I think the thing that I really, really aspire to, that I have not achieved, but I really hope I will be able to, is to be able to reconnect with that authentic self. And that, I believe, is going to be the only case in which I will ever write anything that actually matters.
Wow, that's profound.
Yeah,
write that down. Somebody write that down.
I feel like this has really gone. I love the direction this conversation has gone, because I'm still so stuck on you saying we're not really talking about pivoting, but I think we are, and I think you came back with an interesting point to say that. But I also wonder if that's part of the pivot. Are we talking deeply and meaningfully about, is the pivot finding your authentic self? Is that like the big pivot we're all going to hit in our life in some point?
You there.
I know that's what's like resonating with me right now in this conversation.
Yeah, totally. And can I just say one thing? So I recently was in Atlanta, city that I fell in love with, that Anna is from, and I got this bracelet and it says "becoming."
Ooh,
literally all it says is "becoming."
Let me see. I love it.
So I love this bracelet so much because I think it represents who I am at my very core. And that is like a person who is in transit, a person who is still trying to discover who they are. And as I'm discovering who I am, I'm also changing into a different person. So then I never fully discover who I 100% am, because I'm also evolving as I go. So therefore, I'm always becoming until I die.
I think that's it. I think that's the journey of being human. I think that's what we're doing, right? We don't ever arrive. Or maybe we do in some senses, but
arriving for me would be like reaching nirvana. Like arriving would be like being like the Dalai Lama, right? Like getting to a state of, now I have this ultimate awareness of what the world is, and I'm just steadily going to be like super even keeled and not change. But I think that is counter to what 99% of humans on this planet are.
Because it's counter to what living is.
Yeah, because then that's godlike, right? And none of us are at that point. Right? You know, unless you reach nirvana without telling me. Unless one of you is like the Dalai Lama.
Dude, I just started doing yoga like a year ago, so I've got
a ways to go. It makes me think of my girl, Miley Cyrus, who I absolutely adore. And what did she say in one of her, I was listening to a live album of hers recently, and like, why did this just like gut punch me and make me cry in the car driving to work? But she was like, our contradictions can live harmoniously together within us. And like, for some reason, that was such a gut punch at the moment that I heard it. And I was like, oh, that's right. And that, because we're never one thing, right? We're always evolving. And she was like, I'll say shit sometimes and I'll be like, why did I say that today? I have no idea. And I was like, you live so unapologetically you. And that is just lovely and darling and made me cry in my car on the way to work. There's that. I don't know what that was, but that felt like I needed to add to the conversation.
Thank you, Miley.
Thank you, Miley, always. Love you, Miley. I had never heard how you and John got together. And I think I've always wondered, and I don't know why I've never asked, but like, I loved hearing that in your story of how the two of you got together. That was a great moment for me personally. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. It was not just that he happened to be there and like, let me have a place to crash. He saved my life. Because at that time, like I said, I was really isolated and nobody knew what was going on with me. And I didn't have anybody to talk to, and I didn't understand what was going on with myself. And I was in a very dangerous position, but I felt like I was stuck in it. And I was really on the verge of going back, like I remember we were walking around one night in North Hollywood. And I was telling him, I think I have to go back. And he's just like, no, you don't. And I mean, it was a simple thing, but I was like, no, but I do, because if I don't, then this and this and this, I'm going to lose the book. And then I'm going to, and my boss is going to come after me and all this horrible stuff is going to happen. And I have nothing. I had nothing. I had no job. I had no money. I had no place to live. I didn't even have a car. And I was just like, no, but these are all the reasons why I have to go back. And if I can just stick it out a little bit longer, then I'm going to publish this book and I'm going to be famous and I'm going to have money. They're going to pay me and I can like set myself up in life. I can get an apartment. I can, all these things that I desperately needed in this moment. And P.S., I'll be a writer because the commercial gods will have blessed me at that point. And then from that point on, I can write my own ticket. That was what was at stake for me.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like you guys, I mean, when I'm telling you this, you're like, well, yeah, you got to go back. You got to do it, right?
There is a part of me that was like, oh yeah, wait, go get all that.
Yeah.
Go get all that.
It was right there. And I just was like, I have to take this. And he was like, no, you don't. He was like, if you're a writer, you can write anything you want to. This is not the only story you will ever have. It's not the only book you will ever write. At the time I was into writing books, whatever. But he was like, you can make your own decisions for your own life and don't let yourself be sucked into this man's control or this worldview of he didn't put it this way, but this worldview of playing the media, conning the media, which is essentially what we were doing, so that you can get famous. I mean, is that something that you would even want, right? So he was so down to earth and so comfortable in just living as a person. And that kind of woke something up in me where I was like, well, maybe there is actually another way. I think I was so brainwashed by the way that the world is, which tells you that you have to be a brand and you have to, like I said, sort of be blessed by the establishment. You have to get famous. You have to be known for something. At the time, because I was writing a book, it was you have to have a platform. Nobody will ever publish your story, regardless of how good it is, unless you have a platform. So that meant I had to be part of this whole fake bullshit publicity scam in order for the story, the thing that I had just lived through, to have any kind of commercial value.
Yeah, to get your platform.
Mm-hmm. And he got me thinking that maybe it wasn't worth it. And thank God he did, because otherwise I would have gone back. Mm. And I think things would have gone horribly for me. There were things that were going on at that time that definitely could have ended up with me dead. And that's not an exaggeration. There were also things going on at that time that could have ended up with me in prison. And thanks to John, I didn't go that way, Wow.
I have chills.
Yeah. That's, oh my gosh. Next time I see John, I just gotta give him one big hug.
I know, I'm just envisioning John right now. And he's just so comfortable in himself. Yeah. And just, he's
so down to earth,
steady,
and he's
sturdy presence.
He's such a principled person.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you more about what you're interested in writing about. If there's a theme in your work, I know that you write about true crime, but can you just dive into that a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I characterize myself after this whole speech about not falling into branding oneself. I call myself a crime writer with a history of crime, because that's a fun little logline.
With a history of crime.
It's pretty good, right?
It's pretty good. Look at you. Look at you, writer.
But it did take me a while to come to that. And it was basically sort of a process of figuring out what am I drawn to? What do I typically write about? What do I typically watch or read? I love mysteries. This is why I got so hooked on the PI idea to begin with. I love mysteries. I love detective stories. I love investigation. I love research. So all of that kind of sucks me into the world of true crime. And so I have written for several true crime podcasts. I'm currently working for one called Murder with My Husband, which is a ton of fun. And also another called Mind of a Serial Killer, which is very dark and twisty and interesting. And I was just listening actually to the pilot of Mind of a Serial Killer on my way over here, as a matter of fact. And they started talking about like what the like seed of the original idea behind the show is, which is not just what somebody did, but why. So that kind of was like, oh, that's why. I mean, I think that's kind of maybe obvious, but for me, it was a little bit of a light bulb moment. This is why I love crime. I am not interested in stories of people who have found themselves in life. I am interested in stories of people who are becoming. And typically that involves people who are kind of living outside on the fringes of established society in some way. And they're trying to figure out how to become. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that means that they end up on the wrong side of the law. So I think that was my life experience. But it's also the types of people that I am drawn to. It's people who I like underdogs. I like people who have had to struggle, who have not had everything handed to them. And I really am interested in what you do, like when your back's against the wall. And, that doesn't mean like some criminals are just shitty. A lot of times it's people who are lazy and they just want the easy way out. But also, I think we live in a country where it is increasingly impossible to find stability if you are not already born into a place of stability. And so I am interested in like what makes a person choose a different way of getting there.
That's great.
I love that. Yeah. I love this perspective.
Yeah, no, I would say that it's the last bit I think really resonates with a lot of people right now because, inflation is still very much an issue. And in talking to other creatives, I often run into this thing of, oh, wow, you've been doing this for 5 years longer than you have, or 10 years longer than you have, but you're still getting paid the same amount of money than you were 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But inflation is through the roof and like your bills are through the roof. And so I think a lot of people in this country are in the state of flight or fight. And when you're in that state of flight or fight, sometimes a person can justify to themselves to blur the lines of what is and is not okay, or what can or can I get away with, because their back is against a wall. And that's an interesting character, right? It's Walter White in Breaking Bad. It's the like, what does someone do when they're like at the edge of reason, when their life is falling apart?
Mm-hmm. Well, and then when they see, this makes my brain go to the juxtaposition of white collar crime that people just get a slap on the wrist for. Mm-hmm. So like these wealthy people that do get away with these like Ponzi schemes and these, this other way of being a criminal that is apparently okay in our culture and society, because all you get is a slap on the wrist and nothing else.
Absolutely.
And how do you compare that to, the folks on the other end?
The intrinsic racism of our criminal justice system.
Would you say the intrinsic racism?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And all of that. And like who gets to decide what the laws are and what the penalties are. Yep. And I'm they generally don't do it for the common good. They do it for their own good, and their own preferences in terms of who should be allowed to do what. So yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I can see why you're drawn to this.
The last question I had for you, Meagan, because I think it's so interesting. I wanted to delve a little bit into how you came up. How were you staffed? Right? Because I think a lot of folks have a hard time making that leap from assistant or entry level to staff writer on a TV show that gets to rise up the ranks. So how did you make that jump, and how do you encourage people to make that jump?
It's very, very difficult. It's a lot of it depends on luck. A lot of it also depends on your ability to recognize a good situation. And I think we're also in a different place now than we were even when I started. I started actually pursuing film initially when I decided that I was going to be a writer. And indie film was kind of booming at the time. And so I pursued that for about 5 years. I got a movie made. Yay for me. But during those 5 years, I realized, oh, this is not sustainable, right? So then it so happened that that TV was starting to boom. And we were in the golden age of TV, right? And Netflix had just started streaming. And so you were able to watch an entire series, in a few hours on your couch. And I was just like, oh, this is so much better, right? And so I pivoted and I went into TV, partly for artistic reasons, because I love that you can tell a story, the ways that you can tell a story in long form, but partly because I thought this is going to be more accessible, because at that time there was sort of the perception of the assistant to writer pipeline. So I thought, okay, at least this is a path I can take. I was way too old to be an assistant. I was 30 something.
Well, you keep it to yourself. You say whatever you want to say. I'm a big proponent of that.
But like in your 30s, it's really, really hard to start as an assistant. And the way that I had no connections, right? So I think for me, what was effective was, number one, knowing where I wanted to work, like in terms of I wanted to write our drama. So I wanted to work in our drama. And that sort of narrowed my focus a little bit. So I was able to pursue only opportunities in that arena. I should also say that I had an uncle that I was very close to who passed away. And he left me about $20,000, which I say only because it was like a big chunk of money from a relative. And it was enough that I was able to leave my day job at the time, which I had never been able to do, and devote myself full time to finding that first job. So even with those privileges of like being able to take time and pay my bills without having to worry about working another job, it took me 6 months to get my first job, 6 months of nonstop hustle. I was able to get that job by first working for someone else for free. That man gave me a referral. So it wasn't like I just sent a resume. I had a referral from somebody that I had been working for free. And I had to fight to get the job. There were tests that I had to go through, and I had to beat out the other candidates. It wasn't just an interview process. It was like, I'm sending you a script at 2 a.m. and I need it proofed by 6 a.m.
Very Game of Thrones, which, by the way, happens all the time in this industry. Oh, there are showrunners that I will not name who will literally be like, okay, all of my assistants, you are all vying for the one staff position on my next show.
No!
So all of you submit a writing sample, and I will pick 1 out of 8 or 10 or however many. And then that person will get to be staffed, and then everyone else won't. If you're not one of the one lucky person, like, it can be very demoralizing, right? Because they're just like, oh, I missed my one shot. Oh, no.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and the thing is that all that kind of behavior is absolute bullshit. And, more often than not, it's just a game. So they already knew who they were going to pick to begin with. But people like that who do those kinds of things, they enjoy manipulating people and they enjoy seeing how many hoops they can make you jump through. Mm-hmm. So those people, in my opinion, are never going to help you build a sustainable career. They will use you if they think that you are useful. They will use you until you die, but they are never going to help you build a sustainable career. Mm-hmm. So that was what I had to learn. And when I say you have to be able to recognize when you're in a good situation, I think that's the next step. So I got that first job and I soon realized that it was not a situation that I was going to be able to grow in long term. So then what do? You have to figure out a way to get a different job. That can also be very tricky politically because, the boss finds out that you're looking elsewhere, whatever, that makes them angry. They decide to blackball you. All of this stuff actually happens. In my case, I was extraordinarily lucky in that my last day on the job, I had been training my replacement and I was walking through the hall and, somebody who was on the show that we were on was like, "Hey, I saw your replacement walking around. Where are you going?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I don't really know, but I'd really love to have a writer's assistant position." And that person was like, "Oh, I happen to know somebody who's looking."
That's wow.
Incredibly lucky. Wow. He said, "Send me your materials." And so I was prepared. I had my resume and everything, and that was all great. And I had some experience by now, right? So I sent him my materials. I got the interview, and that was how I got the writer's assistant job on Games People Play, which Vanessa Middleton and Kim Newton were the showrunners at the time. And instantly, when I started that job, I knew that this was actually a good situation for me because they were so supportive. Mm-hmm. And within a month of me starting that job, they pulled me into a meeting and I thought I was in trouble. And they said, "We're going to give you a freelance script." So it was it happened so fast. And I think that's what you have to kind of look for, that there will be people with, the best of intentions who want to help you, but maybe they can't. That's one thing. But there are a lot of people in this industry who will use the promise of a freelance script or an eventual staffing job to string people along for years and years and years and then dump them whenever they get too old or tired or jaded or they get suspicious or they start to ask for too much. So you have to find ways to get yourself into the good situations quickly. And that's what I was able to do. And like I said, Vanessa staffed me on season 2. So that was my first sort of big break. And then after that, I didn't get staffed again and I didn't get another job. And it took about another year and a half. And then I got a call about another assistant job. And by now I'm getting way too old to be an assistant. But in this case, it was going to be working with some writers whose work I already knew and really respected. And so I was like, I'll take that step back, be a writer's assistant again. And then it turned out that was on Cross. And I have been working on Cross pretty steadily for 2.5 years now. I was also staffed on the second season of Cross. And got a third staffing job also in between on Tyler Perry's Ruthless, which was super fun. That was the only job I've ever gotten off of just a script. Everything else has been through personal referral and working my ass off as an assistant and then getting a step up. I still have not made it to step 2 on the ladder. I've had 3 staff jobs and, at this point I'm happily writing for a podcast, but I have no idea where the next job is going to come from or what it will be. So it's just all of that to say it's really, really hard. And the best thing that you can do for yourself is just look for the people that, like Anna, you were saying, you want to make cool shit with the people that you love. Look for the people you love. find those people and stick with those people. And, the rest of it will come eventually.
That's great advice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great note to
I think
leave
that's
on.
a great note to end on. Is there anything that, Elsa, you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
Nope.
Yeah.
That was plenty.
I am dying.
That was a good way to end. I don't want to say anything else.
I'm out.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so
joining
much,
us,
Meagan.
Meagan.
Thanks you guys for having me. This was super fun.
I did want to ask you, where can our audience find you? What are your social media handles or handle? Where can people follow you?
I am trying to get off of X, but I'm still there for right now. So X or Instagram at Meagan Daine. It's Meagan Daine.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. She has such an interesting background. And I fully, more deeply understand her draw to true crime. Mm-hmm. And I knew she had personal experience, but this was much more in depth. And I'm learning so much more about the people I care about. This is what I was talking about in the podcast. I want to make things I love with the people I love. And this is this has been so fun. I hope you all found it fun too.
Yeah, and even if nobody listens to it, it's like at the very least, we get to interview our friends and record their stories and ask them all these questions that we normally wouldn't ask them.
And connect. We keep talking about we want to make art to connect and not feel so alone. And that's what this is doing for me.
And speaking of connecting, if you like this podcast, please hit the like, subscribe, whatever button on whatever platform you're on. And follow us so we can make more of these. Thank you.
Thank you.